Well, good morning. It's nice to be back. I said it's nice to see so many people without masks. Well, we're going to begin with the prayer. You have a copy of it? No? Some do, some don't. Hail, Holy Queen. It's on the orange paper or the purple paper or yellow paper or pink paper. Green. Okay. Well, I'll begin by telling you I tried to find the prayer, Margaret. You would remember this, that we said before class. I could. Yeah. Well, we couldn't. See, you knew it. I should have called you. But anyhow, I decided to choose the two prayers that we continue to say: the Hail, Holy Queen, which was the Salve Regina in Latin, and the Light of the Church, O Lumen in Latin. And we sung these in procession every night at Compline. And we're not the only Dominicans who did that, okay, Newberg. So we decided to do that. So we're going to begin with saying those prayers together, and just remembering that our God is with us and our foremothers are all gathered here. So all those thousands of former Fall River, Ostig, and Newburghers are in this building and in this room and supporting us in what we do. So let us begin with together, Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy, our life, our sweetness, and our hope. To thee do we cry, poor banished children of Eve. To thee do we send up our sighs, mourning and weeping in this valley of tears. Then turn, most gracious advocate, thine eyes of mercy toward us. And after this our exile, show unto us the blessed fruit of thy womb, Jesus. O clement, O loving, O sweet Virgin Mary. And to Saint Dominic, O light of the church, doctor of truth, rose of patience, ivory of chastity, you freely pour forth the waters of wisdom. Preacher of grace, unite us with the blessed. Blessed Father Dominic, pray for us. Let us pray. Grant, we beseech you, Almighty God, that we who are weighed down by the burden of our sins may be relieved through the patronage of Blessed Dominic, your confessor and our Father, through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Okay. Thank you, Sister Catherine. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good. Okay, well, good morning. Thank you all for coming today. I wish I could be with you in person, but as we know, we're still officially in a pandemic, and I am officially in quarantine. But if we've learned anything over the past 2 years, we've learned to be flexible and we've learned to use Zoom. So I am very glad that I did not have to miss this and could be with you virtually today. But more importantly, over the last 2 years, we've learned to rely on each other. And I'm very grateful to the team that helped to plan this presentation. Carlinthia, Trevor, Gina, and Nick, in addition to our guest presenter, Sister Catherine. Thank you so much, Sister Catherine, for that prayer and for your presentation today. When it became clear that I should be working from home this week, everyone agreed to step up and carry on, and Lisa and Melanie offered to handle the paperwork and sign-in table, and I want to say a special thank you to all of them for making today possible. As you know, today's mission presentation is on the history of the Newberg congregation, the largest of the three communities that came together to form the Dominican Sisters of Hope. And when I originally asked Sister Catherine if she would present, and Trevor and Carlinthia and Gina if they would help to plan the gathering, and they all said yes, I knew this was going to be a terrific session. As our archivists, Carlinthia and Trevor know this topic very well, as does Gina, who, as our digital journalist for Mission, had written most of the content on our website, which is a terrific source of information and resource on history. In addition, they're all incredibly enthusiastic and had all kinds of ideas about ways to bring this history to life for you today. You heard it in the music that you heard as you were coming in this morning, through Sister Catherine's prayer, through artifacts such as those you see on your tables. Each one has a very special significance to the Newberg congregation, and there'll be time to ask questions and talk about them later. But before I say a few words by way of introduction to Sister Catherine, for those who don't know her, I want to say we are recording today's session. The recording will be turned off when we move into breakout discussions, and then we'll turn it on again when we come back to the large group. Many of you already know Sister Catherine well as a member of prior leadership teams. She was originally a member of the Newberg congregation. She's a graduate of Mount St. Mary College, a former school teacher, principal, college professor with a specialty in communications. She served as prioress twice, including as the first prioress of the Combined Hope congregation. And you may see her here now from time to time as she's currently working as a volunteer in archives, in addition to her many volunteer hats at Mount St. Mary College and on various boards and committees. She is a wonderful speaker and storyteller. And when I asked her to do this, she said she's never met a microphone that she didn't like. So you are in for a treat today, and we will turn it over now to Sister Catherine. Thank you, Sister Catherine.
Thank you, Anna. I'd just like to clarify, I was only prioress once, not twice. All right, if you could put the first slide up, please, Trevor. Nick, I'm looking at Trevor. I do that all the time. Sorry, Nick. Okay. All right. First of all, to tell the story of the Dominican Sisters of Newburgh in 20 minutes or so is really impossible for the 125 years of its operation. Okay. So, and if you want the whole story, there are copies of the book Other Waters. So you see all these pages, they're full of all the details of the history. So I'm just going to highlight some of it, and so that you could get some of the substance of the culture of the former congregation. I would say that the main tagline, if you will, is call and response through service. That's mostly, especially through education. And so as we move to the next slide, we begin not when the Dominican Sisters of Newburgh began, but when the Dominican Sisters began. The founding of the order, although the men don't actually agree with us, was in 1206, when women in Fanjeau were taken by St. Dominic, who had been in Fanjeau for over 11 years, trying to combat the Albigensian heresy, a heresy that was body and soul, and body was bad, soul was good. So it was a dualistic heresy. When these women came together and wanted to come back to the Catholic faith, Dominic had to find a place for them because there was not a friendly atmosphere. So he found down below Fanjeau, he found a convent, a building that became St. Mary of Puy, which is the foundation of Dominican women, and they became a cloistered community there. And the monastery is still in existence. So from 1206 to now, that monastery has functioned. Dominic wanted to assist the women, to assist him with the holy preaching. In other words, he had a vision that these women would support his holy preaching. But the church had another idea, because women at that time, if they became religious, were cloistered. That is, they went into a monastery and they stayed there, and they only came out, only some of them could come out, and they didn't do the kind of work that you know that sisters now do. Give them the next slide. This is the cloister in Regensburg, or Ratisbon, the city that has two names, in Germany. It was founded in 1233. It has had continuous operation since 1233, and it still exists. However, not exact. I don't think this works on here. All right, forget that. All right. Now, if you will look, you will see a little bridge on the street here that goes over to another building. I'm going to walk over here and point it out right here. Okay. That still exists today. The monastery still exists today, but not at this size. A number of if you look at the wall here, okay, about here is where the present monastery ends. A lot of those buildings, there was a fire and they were taken down, but the monastery still exists. And I will tell you a quick little story about it. I went to Regensburg, And Trevor and I both tell you, if you ever go to Regensburg, go under the bridge and get the sausage and beer. There's nothing better than the sausage and beer there. But anyhow, the monastery still exists. And I went there with Sister Agnes. We did a river tour and we went to get a tour of it. And I went in through the door under that bridge there because that's the only way I could find my way in. And the sister in there, of course, they speak German, asked if we were the Americans. And we said yes. And so she had to get this only sister in the house who spoke English. Well, the poor sister comes over and she says to me, "You used the wrong door." I said, "The wrong door." She said, "This is the end of the tour." I said, "Well, you want me to go around to the other door?" And she said, "No, we do it here. I will try." And I'm thinking to myself, you've been here 25 years and you can't go backwards, But there was we say in cultural communication, every ethnic group has its pattern, and the Germans are very orderly. So that's what was going to happen. But anyway, to go back to the story, what happened, this monastery in 1233, and after that time came the Napoleonic Wars, in which monasteries and churches were closed. But this was not closed because the sisters went across that little bridge, even though they were not supposed to leave their enclosure. They went across the little bridge to teach in that other building, which was a school. So they never left the enclosure because they went through the bridge. And anyhow, they had a great reputation for teaching. And so when Napoleon came in, he did some of his horses were stabled at the monastery, but there was no closing of the monastery. Well, in about 1853, a Benedictine named Dom Wimmer, that Dom is his title, okay, he came to Regensburg to meet with the sisters because he had a relative who was in the monastery. And he was, entertaining the sisters, and he said, "We would love for you to come to America." And then when he got home, he said, "What did I do? I invited these women to America. I'm going to have to take care of them." Well, meanwhile, the story from the Newberg side is that Mother Benedicta Bauer, who was in charge of the monastery, asked if 4 sisters would volunteer to go to America. And Sister Augustine, Sister Josepha, the 2 choir sisters. In a monastery, there's 2 kinds of sisters: the choir sisters, who say all the prayers, and the house sisters, who take care of the domestic things of the house. And the difference between them is the choir sisters wore white scapulars, the piece of cloth that came down. The house sisters or lay sisters wore black scapulars, and they could go out more often than the others. Well, anyway, that's how the story went from Newberg. We thought it was wonderful. These gals just said, "Yeah, I'm going to America." Well, then Suzanne Noffke, who was the Racine Dominican, wrote the history of the Racine Dominicans, and she got into the German archives really deeply. And here's what the real story was. What happened, when you put people together, there's going to be dissension. Well, Mother Benedict Bauer was quite a character. And what happened was there was a novice that some of the sisters thought should be kept, and other sisters thought she should be let go. Well, evidently, Josepha and Augusta were on the wrong side of the decision. So they really got this kind of Mother Benedicta said, either go to America or go home. So they went to America. Now, I'll tell you a little side story that happened later on. When Mother Benedicta decided to come to America, she thought she would settle in New York, where the sisters landed, but they said, "So long." So she didn't stay, and she went on to found the Dominican Sisters of Racine, Wisconsin. But anyway, the next slide, please. This is what it looks like today. That's the bridge that still exists on the side of the monastery. Okay, we could go on. Okay, so the 4 women dressed in the dress of the day just took off for America: Josepha, Augustine, Francesca, and Jacobina. The competence of these women was astounding. All the Jacobina and Joseph Josefa, excuse me, and Augustine were very talented. Both Augustine was very talented musically, but both of them had a very fine education. And so even Augustine had taken some English classes before leaving Germany. So she had some English, but these were women who were very ready to teach. Now, what you have to understand is they were coming to teach the German children, so that because the German clergy did not want the German children to lose their language or their culture. It wasn't to teach them English, it was to teach them in German, okay? Well, they had great education. However, they also did the austerity of the cloistered schedule, which I'll talk to later. So they were teachers, but yet they were cloistered nuns, which meant they recited all the office and so on and so forth. But their schools, when they do open a school, they were first rate. We'll do the next one. Now, what happened was Dom Wimmer was a no-show. Sister Peggy Murphy from the Amityville Dominicans calls him no-show Wimmer. Okay, he did not come to receive them, and this is what they came into at Castle Garden. This was the entrance at that time, 1853, how you came into the country, not Ellis Island. Ellis Island would come later. And so they got there, nobody was there to receive them. Now, you can imagine these German ladies who had been in a cloister come out to all this hustle and bustle. They had trunks, they had furniture that they brought with them, and they had their little bag with their habit in them, with their habit. So, but they did have a letter. Fortunately, one of the priests in Germany wrote them a letter to a Redemptorist priest who were not far from Castle Garden. So Sister Augustine, with her minimal English, was able to get directions and get to these priests, who eventually got them to a place, but not Dom Wimmer's. They were supposed to go to Pennsylvania, but they didn't. They never landed in Pennsylvania. Okay, next one, please. So this is the kind of world that these German ladies stepped into. Okay, teeming with immigrants coming in, little language. But then what happened was the Redemptorist priest said, listen, this Father Rafina, he's got a place in Brooklyn, and he'll take you. He wants you. So they went there to Brooklyn. They walked into Brooklyn and lived in the basement of the rectory, which was all dirt floors, 4 rooms, and not very conducive to living conditions. Okay. However, on the first day of class, the 2 sisters who were going to be the teachers, okay, had 100 students, and that only doubled and tripled as it went on. Okay, their competence was known already in America as school teachers. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Now, what happened? Once the word went out that these German sisters were doing such a great job with schools, other German parishes wanted them. So the first call for some new teachers in another parish was St. Nicholas Parish in New York City, okay? And in 1859, Mother Augustine, who looks rather holy, okay, she was sent with Sister Rose, and they went to St. Nicholas, which had better conditions. It was a stone building. It had better conditions. It had room for classrooms. Okay. And however, again, they walked in 100, 150 students the first day, and that just increased and increased. Okay. Now, the problem was Second Street was in the area of Irish immigration. And so what happened was girls were attracted to the lifestyle of the sisters and wanted to join. Now, when you had a cloistered community, once it took postulants, that's the first level of entrance, into the convent, it was supposed to separate from the other monastery. Okay. Now, first of all, these women were torn by having separated from Regensburg. Okay. And now Mother Augustine was going to be called to separate from Williamsburg, Williamsburg, which became the Amityville Dominicans, that you know as Amityville today. So she didn't do it. She wouldn't do it. She kept procrastinating for 10 years. So some of us within the Newberg congregation always called her the reluctant foundress. She didn't really want to separate, okay? But they had to celebrate in 1869, and then they had to pay back Amityville or Williamsburg for the building on 2nd Street, because one of the things that the sisters did, which was very wise in the end, every place they taught, they bought the building so that they were not at the beck and call of whoever, of the pastor or whatever. They owned the building. So she had to pay back Williamsburg, which everything worked out, and it worked very well. And we still talk to each other, Amityville. And no, we're very friendly. Okay. And next one, please. So this is what the building looked like. Not exactly then, but a little later on. That's 2nd Street. It's between Avenue A and B. Okay. Now from this building, Mother Augustine responded to calls from places like the state of Michigan, Washington. Now remember, we're in 1869, 1870, 1872, 1873, okay? So she wasn't just sending sisters next door. And then also sent sisters to New York, other places in New York, and of course, across to that other state, New Jersey, okay? The very good state. I come from that state. One of the first places founded was St. Paul's in Jersey City, where I grew up. And the other one that was founded was St. Mary's in Gloucester. Okay, those were the two of the earlier ones in New Jersey. But the call was always to be of service, to be good educators, and there was a great demand for them. So when she sent people, for example, she sent people from, the first people she sent out from 2nd Street, she had 4 people and she sent 2 people out. So the 250 students over there now had 2 teachers instead of 4 teachers. So, I always say that I in St. Paul's in Jersey City, where this is another aside, where I went to school, there were 1,500 students in the school. There were 3 classes of each grade and 70 to 75 in each class. My reading group was bigger than most classes now, but we learned these gals knew how to teach. I'm going to do a disclaimer. Never, that stereotype of nuns with the rulers and all that. I never experienced that with the Newberg Dominicans. I never saw a sister hit somebody. I was terrified of them, but they never hit us. Okay, and so they had a wonderful way of dealing with students. So anyhow, they were here for an immigrant church. We'll go to the next one, please. And the immigrants who came then kind of spoke with a brogue at this time. The ways we were into the famine in Ireland, okay? And so the more they came, the more these women were attracted to the congregation. And so now we had the Irish and the German in one monastery, okay? However, I always wondered what was the language barrier like? Well, all the prayers were said in Germany, etc. Well, it turned out that many of these Irish immigrant girls came as domestics to German families. So they had a base, they did have some basis of the German, many of them. Many of them did not, but they had to learn the German in order to pray and to communicate with the rest of the house, okay? So this was the wave of Germany. But then also later on, next slide, please. Later on in that area and all of Lower New York, we have these very refined German ladies praying in the quiet of their monastery, where, however, outside, okay, where the kind of riots, the kinds of carrying on, the race riots, the riots prior to that, the riots of the conscription in the Civil War, which they got there a little later for that. But if you think about 5 Points, remember that Daniel Day-Lewis movie? There we are, folks. That's the kind of atmosphere that permeated much of the area of New York at that time. Okay, now, this was not for the faint of heart to be trying to teach and live there, especially if you if you had come from the hills. If you've ever been to Bavaria and seen the glorious hills and the glorious forests, it was a big shakeup for these people. Okay. So the Irish joined more and more. But the problem in the area of the Irish were that many of their families died after coming over on the boat from tuberculosis or typhoid or whatever. And so there were orphans all over the place. And the sisters began to bring the Irish orphans into the monastery. Now, I often think some of these German ladies and these Irish urchins running around, I cannot imagine what it must have been like in that house, okay? Well, Mary Ann Salmon was one of those girls, and she kept, they just take more and more, serve the immigrant, whatever they could do besides teaching, but serve the immigrant. So finally, when the second Mother General came along, she said, we can't do this. The children aren't being serviced right. It's not right for them to be stuffed into this monastery. We have to find someplace. So she went up the river and found a piece of property in Blauvelt, New York. And you will know that there's a congregation known as the Blauvelt Dominicans. And so that's how they were founded, Mary Ann Salmon, to get those offered. And so there are the pictures, and that picture over there are the children at Blauvelt, some of the early orphans, in a different situation than they were when they were on the streets of New York. Next one, please. And calls kept coming. They kept coming to a Second Street. Mother Hyacinth, Mother Hildegard, calls across the country, as I said, Ohio, Michigan, etc. Now, when you see this map up here, which is not well done, Connie, I didn't do so well on that. In those named places, there was not just one school. Many times there were 2 or 3 or 4 in those places. So, but it was all about educating immigrants and getting them to be able to be citizens of the country. We had, in the years of Mother Emanuel, Mother Blanche, Mother Mary DeLourdes, we went to North Carolina, teaching in the only integrated high school in North Carolina, the only school in which Black children were allowed to come. Teaching in North Carolina in a school where they had 2 schools, one for the Black children and one for the white children, because they weren't allowed to integrate them. But the same education to the Black children as to the white children. Then into Westchester County, New York, okay? And then came other waves of immigrants. There came the Germans came, then the Irish, the Italians, the Eastern Europeans, okay? Then the Spanish, but we would already had gone to Puerto Rico, okay? We had 2 places in Puerto Rico, okay? So the constant call to educate the immigrant. Next one, please. Now I'm how we became called the Newberg Dominicans, because I could go on for hours about all the other places we went to, but we're called the Newberg Dominicans. And what happened was that Second Street was becoming rather crowded. And so 2 of the sisters went up on the Mary Powell, the steamboat, okay? And Mary Powell was actually a real person, okay? And she used to sit on the front of the boat and at her table, and every day a dozen roses were delivered to her table. And so she was quite a lady. And another side story, when we had to leave the local community that I live with, when we had to leave Guzman Hall when it was sold, and we rented a house owned by the Beale family, on the wall was a painting of Mary Powell. And we said, this is the house we've got to rent, because Mary Beale's great-great-grandmother was Mary Powell. And so it was just an interesting little side thing. So up they came in 1883 to serve the people of the city of Newburgh. Okay. And at this time, Newburgh was a vibrant river town. Okay. Shipbuilding happened in Newburgh, but that drew all kinds of mostly Irish immigrants at that time. Now, this is, I think, I pointed as it were, this is Powell Avenue. And this is where the Mount was, okay, at that time. And when they got there, they were supposed to teach in St. Mary's in Gidney. However, they just loved the beautiful place. And up on a hill on Guinea Avenue, next slide, please, was this White House, okay? It was the McAlpin estate who just happened to want to sell it. And he sold it to the sisters for $19,000. And immediately they opened it as a boarding school and as an elementary school, because St. Mary's right across the street was not ready to open a school. They didn't have the wherewithal to build a school. So they went there, okay? Now, it was such an opening. The first year of the school was such an opening, and so many children went to the school that the public school in Newburgh had to close, because the children went to the fine education, as it said in the book in Newburgh, that the sisters were giving. Later on in now this is 1883, in 1896, it became apparent that the sisters were doing far too much as cloistered. They were still living the life of a cloistered nun, okay? And so it had to change. Let me tell you what they did every day. They would get up at 4:30, except on Mondays when they get up at 3 to do the laundry, okay? Then they did morning office, meditation, mass, breakfast, bread and coffee, rosary, followed by study for class from 6:15 in the morning to 7:45. Then go to another mass. They were really into it. Then school from 8:30 to 11:15, followed by dinner, which was vegetables, except 3 days a week. There was some meat. And if it was a penitential time, like now, Lent, meat only twice a week. And then Vespers, then recreation, then back to school from 1 to 3. Then the novices got to study. Then the profess gave later on, after 3 o'clock, the profess sisters gave lessons in art, sewing, knitting, crocheting until 5 o'clock. Then they said matins and lords, part of their prayers. They had a meager supper, recreation until 8, rosary until 9. No wonder they needed to change the schedule, okay? Plus, tuberculosis was rampant. And so it was a very trying time. So what happened in 1896 is we changed from the cloistered or second order, and I think I gave a little handout with all those things, the first order, second order, okay? We changed from the cloistered to the active apostolic third order. Now that was quite a tiff, okay? Because some, sisters wanted to stay. This is how I entered. This is what I wanted to be. But they did it anyhow, because, there was not so much consensus at that time, okay? It was when the Mother General and the council made a decision, that was the decision, okay? I guess you could complain and carry on, but you still got, And then after that, well, I should say something. One of the things that I forgot happened then, remember, these were German sisters that founded this congregation. And in that trunk and thing that they brought over were their steins, their beer steins, okay? Because the sisters in Regensburg, in order to make money, had a brewery. But in this 1896 time and the change, the bishop or the priest that was helping them out or whatever said, no more beer at the table. And I really was miffed when I learned that. No more beer at the table. So the steins got put away. And so but then what happened was this White House, it was very large, but soon, because of the attraction, they outgrew this. We go to the next slide. And what happened was, in the time of Mother Emanuel, around 1913, the property next door, the White House, you can see over here, okay? And then over here, this side was the Van Duzer Estate. Now, Van Duzer was a pharmacist, and he this was his summer property, but it was for sale because he had died. And so it was for sale. And Mother Emanuel wanted to buy it, but she went to the bishop or the priest who was in charge of they called the ecclesiastical superior, and said, can we buy it? He said, no. So she said, but we need to buy it because they're going to turn it into a men's sanitarium. And we have a novitiate and a girls' boarding school here. He said, no. She said, well, will you talk to the cardinal? He said, yes, but he never did. Okay. So she said, okay. she went over his head and went right to the cardinal. And the cardinal said, buy it, by all means, buy it. It was at this time, the sisters in all of the schools that you saw those were earning $25 a month. And so they had a kick, they got a raise to $30 a month. So Mother Emanuel said, kick in the other 5 and send it to Newberg. And so that helped pay off the debt of $125,000, which was the asking price of the estate. But it went down, I believe it went down to 65,000. Yeah. Yeah, it did. It went to 65. The family was so glad that somebody was taking it. Anyhow, and so this place now constitutes Mount St. Mary's, most of Mount St. Mary's grounds, okay? And the sisters had endless places now, they thought, in order to now look at certifying the teachers, because things had changed. When they came from Europe, they came with educations, but then and they had a mentoring program. So when you went to a school, you were mentored by another sister who knew how to teach. Well, that started to break down, and now states required certification. So the sisters decided that they would have to find a way and open what was called at that time a normal school or a teacher training school. And that property looked really good for that. You see, it had buildings. That building there is now known as Whitaker Hall. It was the carriage house and stable. And below is the garden, or where the pergola eventually made. Mr. Van Duzer raised prize chrysanthemums. So he had his up there. Next slide, please. And inside that carriage house, this is what the sisters did. They had the shipbuilders come, because their love of music and the arts, okay? They had the shipbuilders come and make this room. Now, if you go to Whitaker Hall today, it is still exactly like that. And I will tell you why. Because as novices and postulants, we had to clean all that wood with tea leaves to keep the wood pristine. And I want to tell you, that was not a fun job. I always prayed I didn't get sent to they called it the domus, okay? But the shipbuilders, it was shipbuilders who actually did the work there. Next one, please. But more students kept coming and more students kept coming. And so Bishop Dunn with Mother Blanche said, Bishop Dunn, you know, the school is named Bishop Dunn on the campus. Well, Mother Blanche, she wanted to build a swimming pool. I'm with Mother Blanche, okay? but Bishop Dunn said, no, we got to build a bigger building. So in 1927 to 1928, this building went up, and you know it's still there, okay? The difference is on that end, now it was extended out, and in the 1950s, an infirmary was added, but it matched perfectly. And so the cost of that building was $900,000. They needed $900,000, and they raised $1 million in order to do that, by just going back to the sisters out there in the schools, saying, come on, send some more up, and send some more up, okay? Next one. The chapel was also added after the building was up, and you know that chapel if you've been to Newberg, okay? I love the cars in that picture, okay? And then with the Van Duzer Estate, however, I meant to mention, okay, Nick, this was the main house, or the villa, which still serves right now as the office of the president, etc. What happened was a normal school had to be founded. And so Sister Agnes Alma was a force to be reckoned with, and they started a normal school, which eventually grew into a 4-year college, which opened in this building and admitted lay women. In 1955, they gave an associate's degree. By 1959, they were a full college. Now, you could go and see all the story of this in a wonderful exhibit Trevor put up on Mother Leo Vincent. The story of this is in great detail. But one of the ways they had to raise the money was the Singing Sisters, okay? It was a phenomenon, and Margaret and I, and we weren't singing sisters. We weren't singing sisters. That's right. But anyhow, it was part of a development campaign to build the President Aquinas Hall and the Guzman Hall. They were going to build another one, but then when they saw the cost of it, they decided not to, okay? The record raised, the Singing Sisters record raised over $200,000 because they did concerts, and you see they were on the Mitch Miller show on television. And the college then moved from that villa to the main Aquinas building, which now has been fully renovated as well. And the service continued of fine education, of people giving themselves to fine education. Next one, please. The expansion of the mission, that's how it looks today. The expansion of the mission to educate for the future, to see that children are well educated for the service of God and country. And then after, when things changed a bit, sisters went into pastoral ministry, social work, all kinds of opportunities that were open to them as the schools began to close and as people were drawn to other things. So I would tell you that the fabric of our being, as this was I talk fast, I know, this was a fast 125 years. But I would tell you that I would say the fabric of our being as former Newburghers, that is Newburgh, was to respond to the call of service, no matter what it was, no matter what the difficulty was, no matter how hard it was, no matter how treacherous it was. Those first nuns who went into that house in Williamsburg slept on corn, on mattresses filled with corn husks, and ate meager foods, and many of them had tuberculosis. So what happened and what continues to happen to the sisters in the fabric of the former Newburghers is to go where you're called to service. And this shows that from that call came all of these congregations. This is Holy Cross in Regensburg, okay? This is Brooklyn or Amityville, and this is Newburgh and all the branches that came from Newburgh. The congregations of Dominican sisters throughout the country. So we are all related, and we are all called, and we are asked to respond. Thank you. Move this out of the way.
So now we're going to open it up to questions. If anybody has a question for Sister Catherine, feel free to ask, or if you don't have anything, you can start it off. And then we'll say, okay, next.
Explain why we have so many branches. What happened when the sisters went somewhere?
Yes, they had to, because they were cloistered. They had, well, some of them, that was in place early on. But then the bishops in the diocese did not want anybody reporting back to Newburgh because they wanted to have their own nuns. So that happened early in Jersey City, as a matter of fact. A group went from to St. Paul's, Jersey City, and another group went to St. Dominic's in Jersey City. Well, the bishop didn't want New York to have control over the one in St. Dominic's. That became Caldwell. Okay. And then as they went out, and some of them reluctantly separated. Adrian did not separate, although we went out there early, I think it's 1923, 28, something like that. But then
Adrian and
Edmonds.
two of them separated at the same chapter,
Yeah.
and now they're back together.
Yes, they are. It's interesting. Yeah.
So, Sister Catherine, now, so the significant decision to change the status from cloistered to an apostolic order, did the communities do this around the same time? Did some stay cloistered for a while, or how did that all?
I'm really not sure about other congregations, but it was happening more and more because the strain of the education was just too much, and of course the rules of the cloister are so rigid. Okay, then we went from the Divine Office, which is a great big book, to the little Office of the Blessed Mother. Okay, that was what I had when I entered, and now we have a Dominican breviary that we use, but many of them changed around the same time, some a little earlier. Like, when you went out to the state of Washington, just think about that trip going from New York to Washington in the 1800s. It was quite a trip, and they used to go up on the train that went up into the mountains for the loggers. to get the donations, because if they came down, they all got spent in the tavern. So they want the money, get the money first. So they would take the train up to get some. Anybody? Yes, Lisa? Well,
Could you repeat Lisa's question so we can hear it?
sure. Go ahead. Say it again.
My question is, when did, at Mount St. Mary, did the sisters decide that they were going to begin to take care of their own sisters, like with the infirmary piece? Because I know that was a big part.
That was during the time of Mother Christina Marie in the 1950s. They had started early on. In other words, sisters were cared for wherever they were. But then the members we were larger. I would like to tell you, when I entered the congregation, we were 600. Okay, so we were larger and more sisters needed care. So Mother Christina Marie decided to add the infirmary wing, and we started to do that. I don't remember the exact date, 1950 something.
It was probably in the 50s, but prior to that, you know, wherever a sister was, because they were at a distance, they were cared for in a local community.
Mhm.
And many sisters died in other places. So we have sisters, if we look at where, we look at in the archives to see the place of burial, place of death, we'll find them in many places.
Mhm.
There's some buried in Jersey City, where Catherine is from. There's some buried in Elizabeth, where I'm from. A couple of years ago, we got letters from a woman in Overberg,
Mhm.
because those sisters that were sent up there, I believe a number of them had tuberculosis, although they did also teach up there. But it was, you know, to find the best place for them. But she was concerned because the people up there had honored the priests and they didn't recognize the sisters. And so she sent me pictures of the markers in that cemetery to make sure we knew we had sisters there.
So for further questions, just raise your hand. I'll come over to you just so we can get it on the recording. So that for when someone listens back to it. Anyone else have questions? No, okay. Well, I definitely have a great question. When we were talking about the planning meeting, you brought up how you became a sister. I thought it was a great story and I think you should tell it. What attracted you to Newberg, and what attracted you to kind of the sister life, and like why Newberg specifically?
Well, I was at a time, of course, when women work in the church. I was attracted to work in the church, okay? But all you could do in the church was really teach or be a nurse, and in a religious congregation. And so, but I was attracted to, I went to St. Paul's in Jersey City. What I was always attracted to the sisters, as I said to you before, they always seemed so happy, joyful. That's why I guess we named our record Joy, because they always, at least the ones I contacted, and there were 24 sisters in that convent, okay? The other part of it was they were always available to you. The convent had a back door with a wall, and you could always ring the bell and get help or whatever, and a sister would come out. She probably got killed when she went back inside, but we didn't know that, okay? She missed this, so she was present, she got in trouble. But and they were always outreaching. Now I went to high school, Catholic high school, to the Jersey the charities, okay? Don't send this to them, okay? But when it became known that I was entering, one of my teachers at charity said, "Why aren't you going to the charities?" I said, "Because you have no charity." I mean, they were the meanest people I ever met on the face of the earth. And the Dominicans were not like that, okay? And so that attracted me. I will tell one story about my entrance. I was a casual smoker, okay? But the last cigarette I had was I threw off the porch of Gusman Hall as I walked in the door. So it's somewhere, if you ever canonize me, there is a cigarette butt down there that you could use as a relic.
Okay, I have a question. I wanted to know what it was like joining pre-Vatican II and post-Vatican II, but then before, if you could explain what Vatican II was.
Okay, the Vatican Council, called by Pope John the 23rd, and he said we have to open the windows. Well, the doors opened and the windows opened and everything opened, and that we're just now living into the documents of Vatican Council, which is 50 some years ago, 51 or 2 years ago now. 59, Connie? Oh my goodness, I'm getting old. Oh, stop it. Well, I was a child of the 60s. So we entered, the group that I entered with we were children of the 60s, you know, and so therefore we had access to cars. We did a lot more traveling. We had jobs on the side and things like that. Okay, well, when we entered, the mentality of the novice mistress, not the postulate mistress, the novice mistress, she was still pre-Vatican. Now all the documents weren't out when I entered. Okay, so I entered into the black's habit, the long habit, et cetera, et cetera. But those who were entering had a mind of the nation, the independence, that kind of thing. So there were some clashes there, I would say. We got in more trouble than we should have. Okay, and we probably gave more trouble than we should have. But it was a learning experience. But you know, we were in awe too. You know, we were joining in religious life. We wanted to know what it was like. And so we did follow the pre-Vatican, but then gradually through my early years, the post-Vatican started to come in. And I think the most significant symbol of that is the change in the habit. That was, you know, I can tell a story. Mother Leo Vincent, okay, was the Mother General, and I was coming in for canonicals. That's a thing you go through before final profession. You have to make sure you're really willing to do this and you're doing it of your own free will. Well, I was teaching in Poughkeepsie, New York, and Sister Alice Marie, Sister Margaret Foster, and we didn't have winter coats. Okay, we had the mantles cut down because we had the shorter habit. So some of the ladies in the parish said, you can't go around looking like that, you know. So they had a coat store, so they gave us coats. Okay, they were beautiful black wool coats. They were very warm, but they had gold buttons down the front. And so we walked in the front door, and I met Mother Leo Vincent, and she went apoplectic. What are you doing with those gold buttons on your coat? Get those gold buttons off the coat. You're not going to blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay. So I went home and I told Alice Marie, I said, she was a senior sister. I said, we got to take the gold buttons off the coat. She said, no, we're just not going to wear the gold buttons to Newberg. That's all. She said, do you know how much it costs to change those gold buttons? Because it was double breasted. She said, we're not doing that. Okay. So we never wore the coat to Newberg again. But at that time, so, you know, it changed and it was not, the changes were not easy for people. They were not easy, one side or the other. They were just not easy. Go right ahead, Margaret.
I'll give an example of what Sister Catherine was talking about when, you know, the freedoms that young people had when I was a year ahead of Catherine. But Sister Jeanette, many of you remember Sister Jeanette was in Sister Catherine's group. So we were postulants and novices. They had been there maybe 1 or 2 days. And we had recreation every evening, and we went up to the roof of Guzman Hall for recreation. And I look down and I see this postulant walking around. Now, you weren't supposed to leave the group. So I had to go down and tell her to come up before the novice mistress or the postulant mistress found out she was missing. But it was a normal thing. There were too many people. She wanted to get away and walk around. So she went down and walked around. So she keeps telling me, you always say there are different times through these 60 years that you saved me. But it was that mindset, oh, I want to go for a walk. So I'll go down and go for a walk. But you don't do that. Pre-Vatican times.
No.
Does anybody else have any questions? Because then I'll have any one of the sisters, I guess both Sister Catherine and Sister Margaret, to explain what's on everybody's table, if you haven't read it as yet. And
A
then you can
question,
explain-
actually.
Okay.
Hi, Sister Catherine, how do you see the particular spirit of the Newberg congregation alive today in the Hope congregation or in the ministries of the sisters?
I think the other two congregations that were when we founded all had the spirit of ministry and service always, and it was just different little takes on it. And so I think that as we worked in the past 27 years to build the culture, we build a culture of hope that I think is built on that. It's built on that responding to what's needed. And like I think of how way I could best is I think of how you people have done that in the way you responded during this pandemic at Mariondale here to program outreach and to figuring out how are we going to get the word of God to people. And you did it through remotely, okay? And you found a way to do things. And that's what I think the wonderful spirit that came from Fall River and the spirit from the former Dominican Sisters of Austin, service to the poor, and all of us were serving the poor in different ways, okay? The immigrant church, okay? And that's why I'm so proud of Mount St. Mary College. It still serves the first generation college student. And I think that's so important. But it was different look at service, but it was service for the sake of the kingdom of God. That's,
Okay, yeah, and could you explain, I guess, what's on everybody's table? And you could give the story of the two bells.
The what?
Which bell was used for what? So what artifact?
Talking about the
on your
artifacts.
table? Yeah.
The items.
Well, I could probably do
We could
maybe.
start with the roses and the thorns.
oh, yeah.
When we would, how did we do that? Got the habit.
Novice.
Novice. When we received the habit after postulancy. That's what you meant?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
They can hear her, I think. She's
The-
a really loud one.
My principal's voice. We had the bishop, and after he came back in, I guess I can go through a little bit more. When we got the habit, we first, at the beginning of the ceremony, we dressed as brides and came into the chapel. We were then handed a folded habit and veil. And we took that and went up, and person assisted us to put the habit on. Usually called our sponsor, somebody that we knew before we entered. When we came back in as novices with the white veil, the bishop said to us, "Do you choose the crown of roses or the crown of thorns?" And that was symbol of, there were going to be hardships in life. And so that's what the thorns represented. I guess the roses were the rosier path to life. But you also knew that there was only
One crown of roses. Oh, boxes, those other ones. One crown of roses. And one of the things I learned as we were coming together was that Newberg found this practice out from Fall River in one of the Mothers Generals meetings, and they added that to our ceremony. So thank you for the crown of thorns, Fall River.
This is a Regensburg candle?
Yes, the Regensburg candle. That came a gift to this from the sisters of the monastery in Regensburg to the Newberg Dominicans on the celebrations of our 125th anniversary. That's a candle over there. And then over here we have the Joy record. Okay, that's the original vinyl record, and then we have a CD that was made of it. The stamps over there were to be on official records that are the table with Trevor, Donna, and Carlinthia. And then it's the bell, the school bell. Okay, I think that certainly, but also we were awakened in the morning by the ringing of a bell at 5 o'clock. That's how you knew to get up. You had no watches, so you know.
Somebody was assigned to
to ring the bell through the hallways.
Somebody, if you notice, there's a plaque on the building about the solar panels, Sister Louise Cabade. Well, she was assigned to ring the bell this one week. I guess it was every week it changed or something like that, and she overslept.
So we all overslept.
So then she had to bring in an extra week.
Okay.
Well, thanks, everyone. I think at this time, we're going to go ahead and move into breakout discussions at your tables. Sister Catherine, can I share a quick photo of you?
Go ahead.
I think, is this the cigarette? I think of this as the
Yes.
cigarette.
That's when I was a real nun.
Sister Margaret.
That's me.
So that's Sister Catherine. So at this time, we're going to invite you to take 15 minutes at your tables and discuss these questions. What about Newberg's story resonates with you? Did anything shared today surprise you? How do you see the charism of Newberg alive in hope, alive in your work today? So I'll let you know when the 15 minutes are up. We just have a few minutes left, but we just want to invite anyone, if anything came up at your table that was really sticking with you or surprising to you, we just want to invite you to share it with the larger group.
It's so darn quiet. Hello, Gina.
You don't have to raise your hand, you can just say it.
No. We were just talking about the first one about what what was like surprising or whatnot, in today's presentation. There was just some funny things, of course. I know we were joking around about Sister Catherine's little smoking little fiction thing. But we were just talking about too, like the singing sisters was, I thought that was kind of not funny, but like it was ironic because I'm like, you don't usually think of like sisters, at least a common person or lay person. I don't know that they think that they're generally sisters. And the album, those threw me off because when we came in, that was on before. And I was like, wow, it's very church-esque today in here. And like, of course, they pointed that out. So that, and then the story about the crowns, the two different crowns, was interesting because that, it's news to anyone who's not partaken in how they were sort of brought in as sisters. So, yeah.
Can anyone share, because I think we know some of the singing sisters, like Marianne Ronenberger, and I don't know the others.
And Daniel. And Daniel.
And Mary, and you have the album.
I can tell you.
It's right here. Isn't this Seal Mary?
Yeah, Seal Murray.
Seal Mary was there.
Is the roster on the back?
There's no costume.
No.
All right, I can, the roster is in my exhibit that I posted, that I'm gonna bring up right now.
Trying to think, I'm looking at a lot of them, but they left. No,
Or died.
John Dark died. She was the leader. Trying to think who else in our group. I think in my group, the only one
It's and Daniel.
is that's left is Ann Daniel. Diane Davis was.
My group wasn't in.
Oh, you wouldn't know. Yeah, because they started practicing the year before we entered. She was a student there.
I got them all. So names selected for recording. So sisters, these were novices.
Oh, I can make it bigger.
Oh,
Make it bigger. so-
oh, did you want to see?
I'll
it?
tell you.
Yeah. She'll see who's still alive.
Oh, okay. So these were all
Thomas
novices.
Gerald is Mary Ann Ronenberger.
These are the old postulates.
We were the first group that didn't.
John Christian is one of the sisters in Puerto Rico.
Oh, really?
Sister Pat Peters, some of you might remember her
yeah.
being here.
Uh-huh.
The person who played the piano was Sister Ann Leo. And I think one of the things that's interesting, she taught us at college too, music appreciation. But one of the things that she did before, she entered very much older. One of the things that she worked on before she entered was the Manhattan Project. You know what the Manhattan Project is? Yeah.
Well, what about Diane Dupey and,
Okay.
yeah.
Um,
She would have been, she was a musician, wasn't a singer. I think. Oh, you know. Jordan Bright.
She would have been old.
She would have been, yeah, but they weren't just novices and punches, anybody who could sing.
Oh, so I should bring my. Looks like they're mostly postulants and novices.
No, there were others. One of the things that's interesting about this too is when they went, you saw the picture of Mitch Miller. And so the inside of the veil and the habit were all a bright white. And so they couldn't wear the inside of the veil had to be dyed. It was shark skin and it had to be dyed
Like a yellow, yellowish.
That's
yellow.
why the picture looked yellow up there.
Yeah, because if they had, the habits had to die
They
yellow.
had to dye the inside yellow because the lights, you wouldn't
Cameras.
be able to see their faces.
It's like an angel coming. It's blinding.
I remember on TV, they couldn't wear white.
If you could call for one more question or one more reflection that came up at your table. If anyone's sitting on something that they want to share with the group.
This is not something I want to share, but I'm. No, I actually have a question because I didn't live this, but like with Vatican II, there was a mass exodus for a lot of religious congregations. Can you talk about that?
Well, yeah. Yes, there was. And some of it, of course, was that people really decided that they did not belong, that they had made a mistake, and that they although they lived a good life and they were attracted to marriage or to something else. But another thing that happened was the ability for women to do other things was then available. Okay. And there have been some studies that, during a time of crisis, such as a war, such as a number of people entered during World War II and so on and so forth, there was a fear, a security kind of thing, and we were a secure group. It was all kinds of reasons, but a lot of people left. I entered with 32, and there are 5 of us still remaining. But the one we call our friends who left, we have a reunion every 5 years in our group. We called them bands at that time, but most of the ones who left were very grateful for the time they spent and for the gifts they received, and have given back to the congregation. The house I live in was donated by one of our former sisters who married well twice. And she gave us the money to buy that house. So, there's a, why a person leaves, why a person stays. Grace of God, I think.
Well, thanks, Sister Catherine. That was a wonderful presentation. And we want to check in about the trivia because the fun does not end here. It continues. We've organized trivia for all of us to do in teams. So you might use the team, you might form a team with the table that you're sitting at, or you might form a team with folks in your department as you wish. But I think we're wondering how many people already have done the trivia, which I can't see you, so I don't. Okay, Leanna, I'll also ask you to unmute.
Maybe those who are there in the room, if you could just, a show of hands, if there were any teams that did complete the trivia, then we'll have a sense if we are ready to move forward with the trivia game at lunch, or if we want to perhaps offer you an extension and then do it tomorrow. It looks like there are several teams. Okay.
There's a few teams, it looks like.
Okay. Now, for those that didn't participate, do you still want to? Do you still want to form a team and do it? I'm going to rely on Carlinthia and Nick and to tell us what you're seeing, because we can't really see the results. What do you think?
They said no, so we could move on with the teams we have.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
so thank you to those teams who did answer the questions. And Nick is going to be our trivia master at lunch, and he will announce the answers and the winner. And there can be more than one winner. So each team that or the teams that have the most correct answers get a free large pizza from Capriccio's. So you can enjoy that together. But thanks, Nick, for coming up with those questions. Thanks, Gina and Carlinthia and Trevor for providing all those resources. If you haven't had a chance to look at the website or the new Archives digital exhibit, please do on your own. It's terrific information and really well written and fascinating history. So please take a chance to do that. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to say again, thank you, Sister Catherine, for your presentation. It was really terrific, and I'm glad we got it recorded as well. And I just want to say a few words about the importance of sharing history in general. A week or so ago, when we were emailing back and forth about this, Sister Catherine forwarded to me a Lent reflection that was published by America Media. And the writer frames reflecting on memories and sharing them with others as a spiritual act, and a spiritual act that's especially appropriate during the season of Lent. And it quoted Pope Francis as highlighting the importance of nurturing memory and of passing down memories from generation to generation, both to nurture a healthy society and also as an act of faith. That's a quote from Pope Francis. And he also cautions that the lack of historical memory is a serious shortcoming in society, and that knowing and judging past events is the only way to build a meaningful future. And when she forwarded this to me, Sister Catherine said, I think this is what you're doing in this presentation, in this session. So thank you, Sister Catherine, again, for being with us today, for sharing the history, and really for reminding us of its relevance and importance, not just as something that happened in the past, but as something that affects our work today and our mission and ministry in the future. So thank you. Please take a few minutes to complete the evaluation form before you go into lunch, and you can hand it in to Melanie or Lisa as you leave. And hope you enjoy lunch. We're having a German-inspired menu, so I wish I could be there to share it with you, but hope you enjoy it. And thanks to Chef Anthony in advance for preparing.
Cigarette smoking.
Hope to see everybody next week.